Well, hello there, and welcome back to Faith, Culture, Politics in Australia with Mark. And just before I bring on today's guest, this is just a friendly reminder that to hit the like, subscribe, and follow buttons. And as usual, if you have the means and you'd like to see more content, more regular content, consider supporting me via my Buy Me a Coffee, or even subscribe to the Substack as well. And that'd be much appreciated. And today I'm going to bring on someone that I've had on before, quite a little while ago. Things have been very, very busy, but today I'm bringing on Angela Rojas, and I've caught up with her before, and also Rosa Ranker, who were both heavily involved in Guardians South Australia and Guardians Australia. And Angela has been pushing back vehemently on sexually explicit children's literature in schools and libraries. So, look, it's my pleasure to bring Angela on again, just to get a bit of an update of where Angela's been, and where we're up to, and some of the wins that she's got as well. So great to see you again, Angela. Welcome.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, great. It's been a little while between sessions. Yes.
And it's been a long time. So I've pretty much started this campaign and the pushback almost 4 years ago. I gave my first deputation speech at my local council, and I was given pretty much a runaround. People need to understand that our libraries are not just run by just one local council. It's the whole one card system is in South Australia, run by all local councils, but they're interconnected on the one card network. So it's not having success through one council to make changes has been very difficult. I've also given a second deputation a couple of years ago at Port Adelaide and Enfield Council meeting, and didn't have much success with that. It's just the amount of pushback. But what happened was, over a period of time of challenging, I have challenged a certain book for classification review, and contacted the classification board and the licensing enforcement branch. The licensing enforcement branch is a branch of SAPOL, SA Police. They're the enforcement body to enforce the classification scheme in South Australia. And I've wanted to know, how does a sexually explicit manuscript end up published and on the shelves, available, easily accessible to children? So I really done a deep dive, did all my homework, looked into all the laws, the Libraries Acts and everything like that. And for the last 3 years, I've been campaigning a petition to seek, how they're accessed and displayed in libraries. And I can explain what I found with that. And also perhaps some borrowing conditions, because the Libraries Board does have the ability to do that. But through the classification process for One Book Challenge, I end up applying for classification to become a accredited classifier and assessor for film and games. And that's given me extra knowledge. And I can't classify publications or books, but because they're classified differently, and my accreditation doesn't do that. But I noted that with the whole process, just exposing these books, if many of these books, especially the really explicit ones like the Welcome to Sex and all of those other books, if the images appeared in a film documentary, they would be classified under film classification. And Welcome to Sex shows sexual arousal. That would be R-rated under film and games. So that's what I want to say, that they're not treated equally. Public libraries are public spaces. They're not private places of residence. So having highly explicit books on public display, they shouldn't do that. I don't like to restrict other people's freedom of choice on what they want to borrow, but we should safeguard children. They shouldn't be on full front display. And so what I found, there was inconsistent shelf locations. So I used the example, The Amazing True Story of How Babies Are Made. Now that book there has a target audience for reception to year 2 initially. And it's the publishers and authors that choose the target audiences, not the librarians, not the teachers. It's the publishing companies. I want to make that clear. So there's about 40 copies of that book across South Australia libraries in the one card system. That book also was added on the Premier's Reading Challenge book list for reception to Year 2. So a couple of years ago, just by presenting that book and showing it everywhere, that book was deleted from the Premier's Reading Challenge list because it shows depictions and instruction on full penetration or intercourse. It's very detailed, and it's not suitable for reception to Year 2. So 40 or so of those books across the one card system, some libraries had it in the children's area because it's a children's picture book. Some libraries put it in the teens, some in the parenting collection, and some in the adults. And that's what I wanted to say. Well, there should be consistency across the board. Where does these sorts of books sit? And when I spoke to the licensing enforcement branch over the phone, to the officer in charge a few years ago, he said to me that books that contain sex and nudity should not be in the children's area. So anyway, and I've also, over time, I've also have posted on my social media some images from some of these books, and I've copped restrictions on my social media pages because of that, because they go against community standards. So and there were automatic restrictions, not even a complaint, within seconds of those images coming up. So, and also on the one card system, if you go to the public library and you use their Wi-Fi or their computer, according to their policy, you can't look up anything that's pornographic or sexually explicit. So one rule for online stuff, but another rule for the shelving. So I used those examples and I spoke about that and I gave different examples on how different books and the types of ratings I used the classifying tools to explain that these books, if they were treated equally to film and games, what type of classification rating they would receive. And a lot of them would receive an M, MA, or even an R rating, but they remain unregulated and unrestricted. I don't believe in the idea of book banning. I think publishing companies are publishing stuff against their own guidelines. That's a separate another issue. We're talking now about public libraries. Public libraries are not the true distributor, so the responsibility and the onus is on the distributor. So I met with the library's board members. I won't mention who they are. They wish to remain, hidden for their protection, and I will respect that. So I met with these two ladies a few weeks ago, and we spoke about these issues and examples, and I showed them parts of, reminded them on what's in the legislation on the state and federal. So in South Australia, there's a $5,000 penalty for the public display of a Category 1, which is your R-rated content of publications, but there's also, or even a submittable publication. So that's an unclassified book that, if classified, it should have a higher rating. So they did take those into consideration, because I did find a few books on full front display. And we negotiated, and I put the request that we need to protect children, and that's what we all agreed on. And what that looks like, it was slightly different, but they did agree that, so, which was very good. They took it to the board afterwards, and the board did vote in favour. So there was a couple of things. Shelf locations, they've agreed to make consistency and age-appropriate shelf locations for books. So books that have some sex and nudity that would normally be in the children's area might be moved into the parenting collections, and books that are a little bit more explicit in the teens area would move to the adults areas, and books that, so more consistent across the broad shelf locations. The other thing is that if they find books, which we've had in the past, which would fit under the definition of a submittable publication or should be classified, they're going to notify the vendors and get them to submit them for classification review, which is really good. So these are really explicit, highly graphic books. And it's not just the non-fiction. These are some of the fiction and graphic novels as well. And also they're going to consider adding a young adult section, so a section that's recommended for 15 plus for your M and MA equivalent type books too. So I don't think this is unreasonable. There's so many other, when you look at what people want, you got one extreme where people want to burn certain books and one or ban them, and then you've got the other extreme where people think these are fantastic. I'm trying to find the middle ground, what's fair for everyone, but more importantly, how do we keep children safe? And that's the most important thing, because I had a parent a few weeks ago message me and said, my 11-year-old picked up a book and it was in the teens area. Now she's 11 years old. She might be an advanced reader. And it's not until she got into the book that she realized that there was a depiction of a sex scene. Now, this isn't a picture book. This is a novel of an autobiography, but there was a sex scene in there and it was very graphic. And she didn't want her 11-year-old to read it. And her 11-year-old was concerned. And it's not until you borrow the books and read them until you realize what the content in it is. It's not like a video or game where you see consumer advice on the covers or ratings. So the only thing they didn't agree on was putting consumer advice or content warning on the covers unless they've been classified by the board. They see that as a sign of censorship. So I've got three things that they agreed to out of 4. So that's a win. I'm happy with that. And, it's good that we've opened up a honest dialogue and they can see my point of view or, our point of view on things.
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations on all that you've been doing. And look, clearly from what you're saying, you've articulated it really well. This isn't a book burning exercise. This isn't restricting people to have access to stuff. This is, from what I hear from you, this is purely about keeping children safe and keeping literature that isn't appropriate for certain age levels away from those children that can view that. So I don't think anybody should be, under any illusion that what you're trying to do is restrict people accessing literature, or you're looking at book burning. So that's very clear there. But clearly there's a long way to go, and everything you mentioned there just it really just makes sense. But there's still obviously some things that you'd like to see strengthened a bit more, and I guess that's that ongoing battle. I guess in regards to that. Now, did you want to go through some of the stuff that you got sent through just to show? What did you want to kick off with? Because there was a letter. Did you want to start off with the? Yeah, so I can bring that. So this is dated the 2nd of December. So it's very, very, very recently. So this is the letter.
Yes. So this is pretty much what the board has approved. Recommendations on standard shelf locations. So that what I was talking about. Across the board, they're going to be the same. So you can go to any library in South Australia, and even if there's multiple copies of one book, you'll find it in the same shelf locations. And more appropriate age groups. They do commit to freedom of expression and access. That's one of their codes as libraries, and on an international level, they do support freedom of speech and information, which I don't disagree on. I do believe in some sort of regulation, though, in protecting children, but having good shelf locations to suit, which is really good, and also a certain standard. I mean, one of the books that I went through a couple of years ago that was classified, it was a book series called The Boys. 3 of those out of that series came back a Category 1, which is a R-rated book. So they can't be on a public display without being wrapped and sealed. And they were next to your Superman comic books, because this is a comic book style. So this is what I mean. We need to have them in the right, those 3 Category 1s were removed, but the rest of the series are technically an M rating, but they are going to be placed in the adults graphic novels area. But there's a certain standard that needs to be adhered to be, to have quality books, and not just because that book series had horrible stuff in it, very graphic. Anyway, back to this. So, We can't restrict adults, and this is a code that most classifiers go by. Adults should be able to read, watch, and play whatever they want, while minors should be protected from things that might harm and disturb them. So that has to balance everything out with their collections too. But I don't like the idea of restricting people's freedom of expression. Yeah. But we need quality stuff in our libraries. The investigation of young adult collections, so that's a really key there. Having a section that's clearly shows 15 plus, which is like your equivalent to your M and MA, and that hopefully helps teenagers and even parents make more conscious decisions on what books they're going to pick up. Because like that 11-year-old, there are some children that are advanced readers and will pick up books that are in the more advanced areas or for older teens, but it doesn't mean that the content is really suitable just because they are advanced readers. And that's what that's the point I brought across.
Yep. And then there's another part, obviously, to that, and that's the consideration of content warnings on that.
Yes, so they wouldn't do the content warning, but they will. And I brought up the National Libraries regulations and the Classification Acts and everything. They're not technically a distributor. They're more, it was a very fine line, because under the Classification Act, the word sell or sales interpreted as when something is sold, let, or hire. But because they're a library, they're not technically a distributor. So it is a primary responsibility of the distributor or the vendors to seek classification for highly explicit materials, books. So they're going to write to the vendors on to submit books for classification review. But they will add the content warnings if a book is classified. They have to do that. They have to bear the markings on the covers. But they will put them in the right location. So that's why they're doing it this way. And then the next couple of pages show just some of the examples I gave to them with my meeting and where they're moving it. So you can see the amazing true story of how babies are made wasn't the children's nonfiction, but it's moving to parenting collection. It's perfectly normal. Will be moved also to the teens area rather than the children's. A quick and easy guide. Yeah, so that some of them are moving to different spots, so they're going up different levels.
Yep. And then you've got
yes, and genderqueer. So genderqueer was properly classified by the Australian Classification Board a while back. It came back with an M rating, which an M rating is a legal. It's not really restriction, but they are putting it in the adult graphic novels area. And when I looked on the essay one card system, that book Welcome to Sex has been put in the adults area. So they are quite conscious of what they're doing now and making a bit more of an effort.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, I mean, this is all as a result of a lot of your hard work, and I guess there's others, we know sort of others that are working in this space, but definitely you've been working very hard, like I said, for the last 4 years to do this. So this is a small win, isn't it? And I mean, some people are saying we could go further, but it's chipping away is a small win, and it's really about the public and the community being aware of this. And look, if they're outraged enough, then make enough noise, then further safeguards for children can look to be put in place. But credit to you for putting this together, and the work you've done. Now you've also sort of shared, is it a South Australian Current Acts, the Libraries Act? Did you want to talk into that?
I'll tell you. One's a federal, and one is okay. So this is the Libraries Act in South Australia. Mm-hmm. So this is the act I was referring to when I asked the board to make a condition on how certain materials are accessed and displayed. This is where it falls under. They didn't do it as a gazette, but they still got another thing they need to consider and vote on. So I'm not sure until I think April next year, I'll find out the rest of the results as far as that young adults section. So that's, I think I'll follow up in April, but that's that current South Australia Act. Each state would have a similar section of their own version of the Libraries Act. And if you go to the next one, the next slide, yeah, so this is from the National Libraries Act or regulations, Division 4. So use of certain library material. So the Director General may prohibit or restrict access to and use of certain library material. And if you scroll down to the one I've highlighted there in bold, if the item has not been classified by the Australian Classification Board, the Director General is reasonably satisfied that if the item were to be classified by the Australian Classification Board with a high classification, if the item were to be classified, it's very tongue twisty with all the words. So pretty much, if there's any book that's not classified, which pretty much all of them in libraries have not been classified, if they were to receive a higher rating, like a category 1 or even an M rating or somewhere in between, they can impose some sort of restrictions if they wish to, or certain conditions on where they're displayed or accessed. But that's more on the national. So each state has their own libraries board, and then there's a federal one. So that's the federal legislation that would be more relevant to the federal library or the National Library Board rather than the state one. It just shows, I use that to say, oh, this backs up what I'm saying as well. You do have the ability to do these things. There's a lot of questions. People talk about the rainbow books, and I want to touch on this very briefly. And it's not because I don't agree with what people say, and I have lots of concerns about this. Currently, as it is, through classification, the rainbow collection books, so your transgender, queer themed books, they're not something that's considered under classification at all. They look at sex, nudity, drugs, alcohol, themes, violence, and language. They're the 6 elements that they classify. And it's sort of where do we sit with people in our community and how we fare and everything like that. But if you look at just say classification, if you look at a TV thing, so when there's a TV documentary or news report and they're talking about human reproduction, the issues around human reproduction, bullying or surgeries, because a lot of that trans stuff will talk about surgeries and things like that, or harassment or whatever. All of those sorts of themes, it depends on that they can be classified when you look at under themes. But it's something that currently we need, those sorts of things. People need to write their concerns and show support in different ways. Nothing can be done much at this stage through classification. They're trying to be equally and fair to all people in our community, even if it's only a small group, a very minor group of people that they're trying to, but there is, obviously there is some sort of agenda that's being pushed, but it's very difficult. Currently, as things stand, it's very hard on the classification point of view to tackle that. I want to put my own biases aside when I say all of this stuff. I've got my own viewpoints and what I think about these types of books, and I stand for biological truth. But when it comes to people's freedom to express themselves, as long as it's not being pushed onto other people or onto children, I've got no issues with certain topics in certain books. It's just a lot of these books are targeted to children, and I like to protect children, and I believe in biological truth, and that's where I stand on this. But I also believe that all parents have the right to grow their children up in accordance to their own beliefs without being told by outside or by governments what they should be doing. So it's a difficult situation there. That's another whole that's a whole nother battle on its own. That's completely separate. My whole focus on this battle at this stage was just the explicit books and materials. Even from what I understand, the LGBT community in some areas I agree that the trans and queer stuff is too much for young children too. So there's a bit of division there, and I don't want to give too much of an opinion at this stage. I'm more concerned about what's being taught in schools and what's available, in libraries. I don't want to impose or restrict other people from their free will to choose, because God's given us free will, and we can't impose our free will onto others. I don't want to censor other people, but they do go a bit too overboard. I've seen some of these books, and they're very what I would call propaganda. People are accepting as truth at this stage, and it's you've got an opinion. I'm sure you have one as well on that too. It's
Yeah, no, it's right, and we got obviously, this whole self-censorship stuff as well. The thing is, what you're doing there is you're raising awareness. So if you happen to be a parent that is massively concerned in regards to content that is talking counter to their personal values and beliefs. So let's say, we're talking about biological reality, and it's really about raising awareness within the community. So if enough people in the community go, well, you know what, I just feel uncomfortable about this, and I want to raise my voice a bit stronger. This is that option that they have. You're simply providing information about what you know, what the content of a lot of these books are. And it's true. A lot of the particular the trans kind of sort of labeled books, or for that demographic, they are in the children's sections as well, and they're accessible to younger kids. And so it's really about families, mums and dads, having that awareness, understanding the work that you're doing, for them to then make their own decision about whether they want to be a bit more vocal with it, without you basically saying, look, I just want this, yes, sure, my personal opinion is I'd like this stuff separated from, where kids can get it, or it just stays the way it is, obviously, if enough people are okay with it. And that's just exactly what you're saying, is that the free will society is the way it is, and it's about people making a point of it themselves. But the key thing is awareness, and that's exactly what you're doing, and that's what you've been doing for 4 years. You've been trying to raise awareness in regards to these sexually explicit books that were accessible to very young kids, especially ones that are pretty advanced in their reading and so forth. And you've had some wins in that, and that is the key, right? So that's the thing. It's really about public awareness raising, keeping the conversation and the debate in society going, and you're doing your bit in that regard. So again, hat off to you.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering what your thoughts are then. Libraries and so forth are generally, council, it's local government, and you've got state government obviously talking about this. Now, we've seen over the last couple of years this massive push from state, in particular our state. We're both in the same state here in South Australia, so Peter Malinauskas, and obviously nationally now pushing this under 16 social media ban. So really, I'm just wondering where your thoughts are in regards, because you said you don't want to censor. Really, we're both of the view, I feel, that parents should be doing the job of raising their children, and they should be putting safeguards in place for them, and that's why you're raising concerns. Where do you sit with this ban on preventing children under 16 accessing certain social media platforms with the kind of work that you're doing? How does that tie in?
Well, I don't think it's going to be successful, and I think people will find a way around it no matter what. Look, there's two things I don't like about this. One, it's the whole idea of introducing digital ID it's not just for the children, that's for the adults, and it's for all of us. You know, the biometrical scans. I mean, we're already starting to see that in banking. All our apps are starting to use these thumbprints, these facial recognition. That's a whole nother issue, but that ties into all that. But children, you know, if you're a good parent and you can guide your children, and you can allow your children to feel safe enough to come to you as a parent. Like, I have my own teenage daughters. My oldest is 16, middle one's 15, and the youngest one will be 14 next month. And they have conversations with me, and they're open and honest about everything. And I really have to calm myself down not to tell them off. But I allow them to feel safe enough to come up to me. So that's what I do as a parent. And I'll ask them from time to time, can I see your messages? Like, can we have a chat, what you're looking up? And we discuss bits and pieces. And they're generally good kids. They don't hide things from me. And that's what we need to do as parents, is guide our children. Unfortunately, you get the occasional teenagers that will get into these scuffles and they'll cyberbully, and that's a real concern. But then you got everyone else who might be using social media quite responsibly, and you know, and they might be looking at alternative stuff to mainstream. And I think you know they're seeing things from different points of view, and there's so many positive benefits to that. But we need to teach children how to grow up in a digital world and how to do it safely. And governments are not the parents. We are. And parents need to step up. They need to be more involved in their children's lives. They need to oversee things. They need to teach their children how to be responsible in a digital world. They're digital natives. You know, the older generation, me and yourself, where I call us digital immigrants. We weren't born in the digital age. That came afterwards. We had to immigrate to it and learn how to use this. And we have to, and it's changed so much over the years. But that's up to the parents' job to raise their children and to oversee what we're doing. The other thing I want to make talk about, and this talks about what's in the books, a couple of those books, those sex instruction books, I'm not talking about the books on puberty and human reproduction, but the ones that give instruction. Some of those books teach kids how to do sexting in a safe way and how to research pornography. There's issues in other places under the guise of safety, and even in schools with curriculum, they have conversations on these sorts of topics at a very young age, where they'll start to talk about porn world and expectations and sexting and all of those sorts of things. They're introducing the problem to kids as well. So there's so many issues to look at, but bullying is bullying no matter what, but it is a lot tougher. I did show my girls a few years ago a documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. It was a very good documentary for young teens to teach them about the dangers about social media and about digital footprints. And once you post things online, you know, they could be used. And it's really hard to retract whatever you put online now. So, you know, we need to educate people on the safety. I don't think banning children is the way forward at all.
Yeah, no, good call, and so I'm of the same view. I think it's the parents' responsibility, and we've seen that obviously if you give a state way too much power over individuals' lives, and history has shown that when the state controls more and more of what the people do and tries to be the parent or role in that situation, it doesn't end well. It leads to socialism and communism and those things, and they've been tried and tested in the past, and they don't end well. So I think we all need to continue to push back as much as we can. Of course, we want our children to be safe. Of course, we want that, but it is. You're right. It's up to parents stepping up and making sure in their parenting, and that includes pushing back on how the government's running the country in regards to people not being able to afford to, be at home. They might be working 10, 12-hour days, the mortgage, and, both parents are working. So you kind of, the easy thing is, okay, allowing your kid on the tablet or the phone or whatever. And, there's so many things, but ultimately the buck stops with parents, with the people. The people are, the power, not the government. And unfortunately, we seem to be creeping the other way, where the government's asserting much more power into our personal lives than they ought to. So no, definitely align with your views there. Now, I just wanted to quickly cover, because you've been doing so much in this time. You've had a bit of an overseas trip as well, and you've been working on this. Tell us just quickly a little bit about what that trip involved and what it was all about.
Yes, so very quickly, at the end of September, I joined a group, an international group of, this is a coalition of people from grassroots organizations, so not just individual people, and we all have the same sort of focus on protecting children, curriculum and everything like that. So we all flew and met in Washington, D.C., and we... a couple of our members from Texas have, from their organizations, they wanted to revive an old bill back from the 90s that would investigate Alfred Kinsey Institution, because it's his science behind the comprehensive sexuality education. When you go back to the roots of it, it's his research, pretty much. It's very, the research is very, I don't know if there's a polite way of saying it, but diabolical. there was a chart in his book, The Sexuality of the Human Male, where they took and they recorded the orgasms of babies. Wow. Only pedophiles would, and I'm going to call it out, only pedophiles would record the orgasms of babies and children. I'm sorry, but babies and children do not have orgasms. Anyway, they had these packs put together, and it's in their book. I'm not making this up. It's in their book, and I've shared this once before on previous things. So these packs were put together. The whole team, we had a really good turnout of the amazing people from across the board, 7 countries. And we went around to about 16. We had 16 packs, so congressmen and women and their staffers, and we met with a few of them, had these meetings. We want to revive this bill or create a new one, obviously more modern, because that was done in the 90s. And also a couple of senators there as well. There is a few people that are interested in doing this and supporting. Unfortunately, right after those meetings, the US government went into shutdown, so waiting for correspondence. But our friends in America are following up with that. Afterwards, our group, we held a press conference in just outside the World Health Organization. They had their regional meeting, America's meeting in DC. It's been recorded. I'm just waiting for the final recording so I can share it all. We gave our 5-minute speeches on issues relevant to our own countries. And I spoke more about books and publishing and the issues around all that, because it's international. It's not just Australia. And then later on, we met with a couple of ladies from Mums for Freedom and Mums for America. Mums for America have opened up an international chapter, so Mums for Freedom. And I was part of the press release to launch that, which was really great. So I had 2 interviews, one in America First Studios, and the other one, it was in another studio, but it was with the same thing. It was awesome experience, and help launching that, because we all have the same sort of focus on, improving the lives of families and children. So I spoke about that, and then also, we were invited to a MAGA and Republican meet and greet for drinks at the hotel. And it was a really great event. They actually gave a tribute to Charlie Kirk, and meeting and networking around there. So we had an incredible time. I mean, when people meet, people from different countries, and they're like, wow, you've got an Australian, New Zealander, Ireland and Canada, because at that time there was only a few of us left. They were really interested on why we were there, and we had a good laugh and good opportunity to network. I did have a follow-up meeting before I flew back with Congresswoman's office, Marjorie Taylor Greene's office, her staffer, and I spoke more in particular about book publishing, just waiting on correspondence. I know recently that a Congresswoman is resigning, so I'm not sure if they're going to pick it up or not, but I will try again, because it's the American publishing companies that are allowing these books. And the thing is, with the United States, there's no classification. It's voluntary. Even with their motion pictures, they do. It's not really compulsory. And book publishers, that because of their freedom of speech and expression, but they do have certain laws that should protect against obscenity. Like it depends on how obscene it is, and whether. But they are protected by their First Amendment rights. But they shouldn't disregard other countries and the international distributions as well. So that it's another issue I want to look at some point. But it was really good. We worked really hard as a team. There's opportunities for us we're still working together. We're sharing ideas and information. What they're trying in other countries, we're trying here, and back and forth. And my new friends overseas, they're making so much progress. They're holding information sessions, and it's all the same across the countries. It's not just Australia. What's happening in our schools here, it's happening in Ireland, New Zealand, England, Canada, Wales. It's happening across the board, across everywhere else. So it's not just here, and even parts of Europe. Like it's not just here. So we really need to, and we're sharing a lot. We know where it's coming from. We know it's coming from UNESCO and the World Health Organization. That's a whole another topic. I could speak
absolutely
for a very long time on that. But the trip was amazing. We brought out a really good presence. They never seen an international group that gathered this big in some of those meetings, so it made an impact. But as soon as I hear any correspondence, I'll let you know.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, and well done again being part of all that. And I guess just lastly, you were obviously involved early on with Guardians South Australia and Guardians Australia. What is your sense in regards to parents? Because I've obviously been following your work and what's in this space. I've obviously shared a lot about Guardians' work. What is your sense of parents understanding now and awakening in regards to some of the stuff being taught at schools? We've just had the Renmark High School thing blow up with mum looking to sue. That's just massively blown up. Are you seeing more families waking up and asking questions and pushing back on the content that's been taught in schools and the content that you're pushing back on in regards to libraries and schools and that?
I think when Guardians first started, they had more of a focus on helping protecting children from the vaccine mandates and mask wearing. That's where the focus was, and also because of those restrictions, and helping families come together and help each other out. And then we started to, I suppose, expand and bring awareness to what's happening in schools. There's different viewpoints from different families. Some families are okay with some of the content being shown, and because not all schools are consistent. That's the other thing, is you have a few good teachers in some schools who are not showing as much explicit content. But then there are some schools, and we're getting reports of this, and then people contacted me or contacted Bros or whoever, where teachers are telling parents that that the respectful relationships education or the safe schools is mandatory or compulsory. There are some elements to the keeping safe schools education that is mandatory, and that's more about there's some elements to that, but the respectful relationships education is not mandatory. It's not compulsory. A parent has the right to withdraw their child from those classes, and that's where there's been a lot of miscommunication. I have had emailed correspondence to our minister in South Australia, education minister, about some of those concerns, and I've brought them forward to his attention, and they've dealt with certain schools with that. But the problem is it's the third-party providers. Currently now, I think it's been changed since that Renmark incident. We now only have 3 current third-party providers in South Australia who can teach, and I think it's Shine SA, Elephant Ed and Life Ed are the 3 approved providers. Before we had a lot more. And, they really have to stick, that they can't just use any educational material that they think. That's the other issue I found was as a classifier, teachers believe they can use whatever resources they want for educational purposes like videos and games because it's educational. But under the Classification Act, if a film or game is likely to be M-rated and above, it must be submitted for classification review. There's no exemptions for above an M rating. And this is what I'm calling them out on. I'm working behind the scenes and communicating because I have found some unclassified films that have been used. So as an assessor, I can put those recommendations forward, and that's something I'm working on currently. And I'll give more details another time. But we really need to bring awareness. I think a lot of parents don't want to believe that it's this explicit. I think they think, well, I trust my children's school and their teachers. It can't really be that bad. They're learning about puberty and human reproduction. But what they don't realize is comprehensive sexuality education is teaching sex. They're teaching it at a younger age. That what we learned in year 9 and 10, they're teaching kids in years, 5 and 6, or even years 4 and 5. So they're a lot younger. And the teachers and educators have the mindset that more education is better. It's under the guise of safety. And if you look at those programs with a fine-tooth comb, you'll see that, they have things like they need to teach children about sexual consent. And these education policies are from not just reception. They're written from kindy age, because they cover preschool, to year 12. And it says in there, in order to teach consent, they must teach about sexual pleasure. So they're teaching children not just in human reproduction and the act of sex and intercourse, they're teaching them that kissing, touching, masturbation, anal sex, oral sex, and intercourse is all in the bubble of what sex acts are, or so it's not the same thing. And they teach about, so they do touch on sexual pleasure and at a younger age. So it's not just about, and it comes under the guise of emotional and physical changes as people grow older. They're categorizing under, children are going to see these things, experience these things. Let's have an open classroom discussion about it. It depends on, but some schools are protecting or not showing as much explicit stuff, but there are some that will. And as far as the trans queer plus agenda, like that Renmark thing with the bestiality and the incest, that came under the plus. And the thing about that particular case, and I think I remember correctly, no teacher, they were year 9 students, they were 14 years old in a girls' school. The teachers who are supposed to be supervising their students were not present in the classroom. So they allowed the third-party provider to teach They should be supervising too. They have a duty of care.
100%. Yeah, 100%. No, well, you're definitely shining the light on this, and it's absolutely outrageous how young the children are being exposed to this kind of discussions and topics. And like you say, when I was at school, so we're sort of around the same vintage, year 9, 10 sort of thing. You'd start to look at talking about these sorts of things, and being that young, and children shouldn't have to be exposed to that sort of graphic conversations or even knowledge about that at a young age. So look, I just think hat off to you and what you're doing. I think you're doing a tremendous job in raising awareness within the community and allowing parents to make their own decisions and discern what you're sharing, and then whether they need to keep a much closer eye on what's happening in the schools, what's available for the kids in the libraries. And that's, I guess, your whole point. It's really about protecting children. So no, it's been a great pleasure to be able to catch up with you again, and just to let people know, obviously you have got a Facebook page for people to follow you. You are also a legislative council candidate for Fair Go Australia for Australians for next year's state election as well. I put that in there, and so if people want to follow you, I guess it's on the Facebook as well, unless you sort of got any others as well. But if people do want to know, you've been interviewed quite a bit. I just had a look at Rumble, and you've got quite a bit of exposure there on people interviewing you there on Rumble. So it's not like you're a new person to all this sort of stuff. So if people, I guess the best way to keep in touch of what's going on is obviously your Facebook profile. People follow you there. Is there other ways that people can reach out to you or keep in contact, or is it really just through that Facebook page and just click on anything on there?
Yes, on my Facebook page, in my profile somewhere, I'll double check it, but there is an email address I've created for Fair Go for myself that people can reach out to. I might pin that post actually, so it's the first one that you see. I'll go back and do that. But look, they can contact me through that way, and I usually get back to them, within a day or two, if I can. And for now, that's pretty much it. I mean, I do have an Instagram account as well if they wish to follow me there. It's the same content. I do have an X account, but I'm not very big on posting on X at the moment. But for now, I'll repin my email address and keep up to date. Eventually, hopefully at one stage I'd like to get a newsletter or something out there, but I haven't got all that set up yet.
Yeah. Look, it's tough, and a lot of us, many of us, including myself, are doing this sort of stuff way outside of our normal sort of 9 to 5s and other things, and there's lots going on, and it's not as if we're funded like all the other sort of bureaucratic heads or people that are pushing a lot of these agendas. Obviously, on paid pretty well, so we're all doing what we can, and just so people got the spelling right, that's Angela Rojas, so that's there up on the screen there. It's your Facebook page there, and people can search you up that way, and also if you want to see some other of Angela's interviews as well on Rumble, you can definitely check that out. So look, really appreciate the time that you've given me again, and I really wish you all the best. So you're doing a fantastic job, so God bless you, and God bless the work that you're continuing to do, and it's for a good cause. It's all about the children. It's not about trying to I guess impart yourself on adults or their lifestyle or their life, but the key focus is on always looking at ways that children can be protected. So well done for that, Angela. Really appreciate it, and I'd love to you to keep me in the loop and keep the audience in the loop of any new updates as well. That'd be much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mark. I always love chatting with you. And no, I'll definitely keep you updated and everyone updated as I go along. And we'll see what comes of this, and everything's going along well. So thank you so much for having me on.
No worries. Pleasure. All the best.
Thank you.
And that was Angela Rojas. So if you want to follow Angela, obviously the Facebook page details that I've sent. And as always, if you've enjoyed this conversation and you enjoy this content, and you'd like to see me produce more of it, you'd like to see it, spread a bit wider, please like, subscribe, share. But also, if you have the means, please consider supporting financially as well through Buy Me a Coffee or subscribing to my Substack financially if you've got the means to do so. I know it's tough out there, so I get it, but I'll continue to try and do what I can in my capacity to bring stories like Angela's out to you as well. And as always, I'm going to finish on a little bit of a clip that I really like to share as an outro video. So God bless you out there. God bless South Australia. And God bless Australia. And like to look at seeing you soon, hopefully. So all the best. Take care.
The next 3 minutes, I'd like you to see and hear something which we feel is rather special.
Here in this God-given land of ours, Australia, this proud possession, our own piece of earth, that was built by our fathers who pioneered our heritage. Here in Australia, the land of our birth. Australia, Australia, all around the land, strong and the free. It's our home and our own land to cherish for eternity. Australia, Australia, the land of the free. Here in Australia, we treasure love and liberty. Our way of life, all for one, one for all. We're a peace, loving race, but should danger ever threaten us, let the world know we will answer the call. God